We've been discussing Genesis 1 and talking about how the story of creation in Genesis 1:1 through chapter 2, verse 3 portrays the world we humans live in as a cosmic temple created and ruled over by God. Now that we've come to the end of the kind of textual discussions about these verses and what they mean, tonight we want to put some ideas together, connect a few dots, and talk about principles of living around them. Principles about how all humans everywhere are supposed to be living, because we're all living within this temple that God created. So let's talk about some of these implied principles. If creation is to be understood as a temple for God, how should we humans organize our lives within His orderly temple home? That's the question we want to answer. Now, you can get way specific about all of this, but I can't apply the scriptures for you. So instead of getting overly specific, as I know some pastors are wont to do, I'm just going to give you some basic principles to think about. And I think it boils down to three major things and a couple of other things that I'll mention afterwards. But living within God's temple creation involves mastering three major concepts in healthy manners: boundaries, responsibilities, and rhythms. Healthy boundaries, healthy responsibilities, and healthy rhythms. And if you can understand the macro picture of Genesis 1 as telling you big picture stuff, the ways things are supposed to go, I think these are probably the three main things, but by no means the only things, that we want to understand out of Genesis 1. So let's start with healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries, this idea in Genesis 1 comes from how God creates things. He separates darkness from light. He separates waters from waters and brings forth land. He separates male from female. The healthy boundaries creates ordered living. And it's when you've created ordered living that you don't descend back into disorder or chaos and ultimately death or non-life. So the order of events in Genesis 1 is that he starts with this chaotic, ultimately lifeless, formless, and void universe, and he starts separating things out, putting boundary markers on the pure chaos. And out of it, in creating the realms, he fills the realms with life. So if you don't want to go backwards, descending back into disorder into chaos, and chaos ultimately leading to death, you actually have to make and maintain healthy boundaries. You have to know where limits to things actually are. And knowing where limits are actually helps create peace, because a lack of order is where we get anxiety from. I recently heard a good definition of anxiety from, I forget who, because there's so many good psychology YouTubers out there. It might have been Jordan Peterson, and he probably has said it somewhere. I just don't really remember, but he's the psychologist on YouTube I listen to the most, where he points out that the nature of anxiety is created because we don't know where the limits of things are. And because we don't know and we're forced to live on unknowns, anxiety is created. And instead of throwing a pill at it and hoping that you can neurologically fix yourself by medication, instead you want to go out and you actually want to create boundaries and space with stuff. The medication should only help you in the process. And once you have a good boundary in place in various parts of your lives, the anxiety naturally goes away. And you shouldn't need anxiety medicine anymore. Only Big Pharma is the one that actually wants to just ongoingly medicate people. The better option is to say, look, you're an image bearer of God. You're designed to actually go out, wrangle chaos and disorder, and turn it into ordered, healthy space. This process actually helps you deal with your own anxieties. A lot of the times in today's culture, we people who are such an anxiety-driven culture, it's because we don't know where the boundaries are, and we're living in that disorder or chaos state, and we cannot process anything in a healthy manner. You must know where the healthy boundaries are in order to live in peace. The violation of healthy boundaries is what creates fear and anxiety. The question then becomes, do you know the proper boundaries between what you can and cannot do in your own life and in all your varying relationships? Has anybody ever watched Severance? It's an Apple TV show, and it stars Ben Wyatt from Parks and Rec, and he's fantastic in the show. But the idea is, they sell it in the pilot episode as a work-life balance, where they go in and they surgically sever your brain, which means you're who you are outside of work. And then when you go to work, you enter this elevator and you go down the elevator, the procedure like snaps something in your brain. All of your memories of the outside world goes away, and you have only your inside working self. And that's called your innie. And your outie is your outside personality. And they're considered two different people because you don't have any of the memories, you're a different person. And they sell it as a work-life balance. Hey, you don't even have to think about what goes on at work when you're at home. But they actually get all these people, as the series go on, come to find out that these are people who don't have good life balances going on, that severing themselves doesn't help, and they're not really dealing with their problems in either space. That now they just have two worlds that they have to deal with problems. Their innies have to deal with the work problems and all the things going on in them, and the outies have to deal with all their personal problems, and because the boundaries are constantly eroding, and the innies are trying to figure out what's going on the outside, and the outsiders are trying to figure out what's going on the inside. The boundary markers are being eroded. A lot of unhealthy things are happening in the people's lives, in the people's emotions and anxieties, and it's all just kind of crumbling together, and it's not good. So you need healthy boundaries. Yes, you have to have a work-life balance. Severance is not the way to go about that. All right, so that's healthy boundaries. Let's talk about healthy responsibilities. Rugrats was a show that I watched when I was Sam's age. It was on Nickelodeon. And Angelica's like the 3-year-old, and the rest of the babies are like 2 and under. And the babies basically come to Angelica and they say, hey, you want to go outside and play? And she's like, I can't. I got responsibilities now. She said, responsibilities? And she's like, yeah, that means I'm not allowed to have fun anymore for the rest of my life. And I like that joke back in the 90s when this came out, because a lot of our culture thinks that to have responsibilities is, one, not to have fun, which is not true, but also that the point of life is to live for the fun, and that you want to avoid responsibilities as long as you can, and then they only begrudgingly take up responsibilities because they need the money, or, whatever. But the point of Genesis 1, where God says, let's make man in our image and let them rule, is to say, let's give humanity responsibility over the creation. Let's let them be in charge. And so we find that fulfilling responsibilities is actually the path to healthy humans. Healthy humanity. You want to be a healthy person? You have to know where your boundaries are, and within the limits of those boundaries, you want to fulfill responsibilities. And this is what God is working out. And God sets all the boundaries up in the world, and then He puts humanity in there according to Genesis 1. The story knows what it's doing. God creates the limitations for humanity as a whole. And then He puts humanity there and He says, just stay within these boundaries and fulfill your responsibilities. And you need to fulfill responsibilities in all 4 aspects of life. The 4 major aspects of responsibilities are: you have responsibilities towards God, you have responsibilities towards other people, you have responsibilities towards the creation itself, and you have responsibility to yourself. These are the 4 categories that all relationships are intertwined in the Scriptures. A lot of the times we boil it down to, in Baptist circles anyways, in modern Protestant Christianity, you have God and you have other people. And you don't really hear too much about creations except for the people that want to be the tree huggers and who go overboard and say that you have more responsibilities to Mother Gaia than you do towards other people or to the unborn babies or whatever. And then you have other people who are like, well, you got to be true to yourself. You got to be responsible for yourself. And it's like, actually, they're all true, valid points. But when you start to overemphasize too many of these, you start to be blind to the other ones. People who are too into themselves have nothing towards God or other people. And some people are so responsible towards God, toward into God, and care so much about the relationship with God that they don't actually see how they're treating other people and how it reflects on them, and so they have a bad self relationship because they're overemphasizing the God relationship. But you fulfill your responsibilities towards God, and like James says, or is it James or is it John? Because they both say something similar, but it might be John in 1 John who says, "How can you claim to love God whom you have not seen while you hate your brother whom you have seen?" Meaning, how do you treat people so badly? That's how John says it. James says it like, okay, if I just say, if I know you're in need and I say, okay, well, go away fully blessed, and I hope God provides you with what you need, but I myself don't provide you with what you need, what good is that to you? It's like, you fulfill our responsibilities towards God oftentimes by how we actually treat other people. And Jesus' whole point is, if you want to have a good self-perception and a good relationship with yourself, you actually need to work on your self-reflection by how you treat other people. The Pharisees are really, really into themselves, and the Sadducees, as the ruling Jewish aristocracy, loved themselves, but they really they really despise other people, and they look down on other people, and they treat them with contempt. He says, if you have no real relationship with God because of how you treat His image bearers around you. And he's trying to get them to reckon with all this stuff and self-course correct, because Jesus knows that fulfilling your responsibilities mainly towards these four categories in the right way is based on healthy boundaries, and it's actually the path to becoming a fully human person. And I think Genesis 1 is at least implying this idea. And I think the fact of the matter is, you will never like yourself or your life unless you're actively pursuing a purpose, which is another way of saying you have to actually fulfill some obligations and responsibilities in this world. Purpose is gained by both properly relating to yourself while continuing to look beyond yourself and integrate things outside of yourself that you're finding there. So you're a child like Angelica, and all you want to do is go around, and Angelica's the selfish brat of the group, right? She's the one who manipulates the other kids to always do what she wants, and she always taking stuff from them. And then all of a sudden she thinks life is over because now she actually has to think about other people and fulfill responsibilities towards other people. But that's not the way it works. You actually have to grow up from being a selfish 3-year-old to being a fully integrated member of society by looking around and seeing and understanding that the world isn't actually here for you. You are a very small piece of the world. The world was before you, and it's going to outlast you. But the way that you reach the heights of your existence in this world is actually fulfilling the responsibilities that you can. And the difference between being a child and being an adult is that a child has to be dragged kicking and screaming to fulfill their obligations and their responsibilities. A child doesn't want to take up responsibilities. A child just wants to do all the fun stuff. An adult doesn't have to neglect the fun stuff, but the adult understands, I have to do these responsibilities and fulfill these first, then I can do whatever I want. That's the mature adult responsibility expressing itself. The idea that you need to go out and you need to find a purpose is in part to say, look, you're actually free to decide what that is. If God designs the healthy boundaries, places us in the world so that each and every one of us shares responsibilities and takes up some aspect of it, and then comes together as a community, all sharing responsibility together, society actually gets built up the way that God wants. And that's actually how things are supposed to work. But within that group of responsibilities that are out there, the shared responsibilities within a society, you're actually free to decide what responsibilities you want to take up, what responsibilities you don't think you necessarily need to do. Because a relationship to this, to the idea of healthy boundaries, is some people think that if they're not in control, or some people think that they have to be responsible for anything and everything. And that's not a healthy boundary. I had a friend at a church who would just, her purpose in the church was to keep peace between all other people. So when two other people were arguing about something, she would step in and she would try and draw all their fire and all their attention towards herself so that they would start getting along with each other. And she wouldn't do it in a rude way or anything. And as noble as her intentions may have been, it was absolutely and utterly vain of her to think that she was responsible for keeping peace between everybody in the church. That's an unhealthy boundary that leads to an unhealthy responsibility. It's not your responsibility to keep peace. If, however, you want to take up the responsibility to maintain peace, you have to understand where that boundary marker is. That you can't bring peace to all men in all places at all times. So you have to pick your battles. And you have to accept that person and that person are never going to get along. And maybe the way to keeping peace is legitimately, in this lifetime, making sure that they stay as far away from each other as they can. How can I maintain that? How can I make sure that that guy and that guy, if they're even in the sanctuary at the same time, are on opposite ends of the sanctuary, and that they're never found to be in a room together? My point is, it actually is a choice to take up responsibility, and you actually get to choose what responsibility to take up. But you have to choose to take up some responsibility, some purpose in life, and that the higher, or maybe I should say, the more responsibility you voluntarily choose to take on, the more purpose you're pursuing. And as you slowly but surely fulfill that responsibility and that purpose that you're choosing, the more you're actually going to like your life. I think part of the reason why so many people are so discontented in our society is because they don't have a purpose. And the reason they don't have a purpose is because they approach everything, one, in materialistic terms. So it's all about the physical, material world, and they never think of pursuing any responsibility or purpose beyond the material. It's get rich or die trying, as 50 Cent taught us. But instead of that, you could say, well, okay, I'm going to pursue a relationship with God. Let me act and live and order my life as if God is real and can be known. I believe this is what the author of Hebrews is talking about when he says faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. Anyone who comes to him has to believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. It's like earnestly seeking him there is in the context of saying, okay, I'm going to actually order my life as if God is real, and pursuing him is going to bring me purpose. And as I understand how he has created the world, I'm going to pursue the things that he thinks are higher in the pecking order, and maybe not reject, but maybe just downplay the amount of time that I'm going to pursue the things that he thinks are lesser, which mostly means like things like money and all the material possessions that money can bring. Personally, I think all the time since last year when I was reading a biography on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, at one point he was working with a seminary school of, I forget how many students, but a fair number of students, and they were coming to the end of the semester, and the students came to Dietrich Bonhoeffer and they asked him something like, will you throw us a party or do something special for us at the end of this semester? And he says, well, what do you want to do? And they were just kind of jokingly suggesting, well, why don't we get on why don't you buy us tickets to that ferry ride, and we go across the ferry into the other city across the whatever lake or river, sea it was. And I would. It was supposed to be kind of a joke because it was such an expensive trip to buy tickets for all of these kids. And then Dietrich Bonhoeffer actually went out and did it. And they said, well, how can we spend all this money on us? And his only answer was, money is dirt. And I think about that a lot because I don't really value money. I think money is dirt. But there is a healthy boundary for pursuing money, because money actually can allow you and help you pursue other purposes and goals in this life. It can fund the real things that actually matter. And it becomes, I guess you could call it a necessary evil. Hey, if you want to do something, you're going to actually have to have it funded. Personally, I would never want to become a president of a college or a seminary or anything, because their whole job is basically fundraising. Meet with the donors, meet with everybody who's been involved with the school, and get them to go on giving and find and recruit new givers to keep the school open. That sounds terrible to me. I would much rather be in the classroom, teaching or learning, because I find that that's actually my purpose and the purpose that I want to pursue. I want to know the things in the Bible that God is communicating that are not commonly taught in the church, and I want to bring them into the church and make them more common conversations that we have. Because I find that that's actually a better pathway to making disciples, which is what God wants. And so I order my life in such a way that I have the most available time that I can to pursue those things. Last thing that I'll say on healthy, well, not the last thing, but moving on. Purpose is pursued at the boundary between chaos and order. That's where the struggle for existence is best lived. You get too comfortable in life, you will stop pursuing responsibilities, and your life will suffer because you have no more purpose. The way that this is going to play out in Genesis 2 is the idea is supposed to be, you are always meant to leave Eden. Go out of the garden paradise of Eden and go wrangle a little disorder and a little chaos out there until you've expanded Eden by turning that space into an ordered Edenic existence. God plants a garden as the starting point and the prototype, and then turns it over to humanity to say, now make the whole world this. I didn't go into it last week, but the New Jerusalem's gates are always open because you're supposed to leave the New Jerusalem as a big metaphor for a city. It's not a literal city, but the metaphorical idea of the gates are opening is to say, hey, now you can actually go out of the city like you were always meant to go out of the gates of Eden and turn the rest of creation into what this city is. So going out there and actually struggling a little bit brings the best kind of life. Because when you struggle, you realize what you're capable of. When you struggle to fulfill your purpose, you actually realize how determined you are to actually fulfill that purpose or let it go. And if you're determined to fulfill that purpose and you struggle with it a little bit more, you tend to almost always succeed, because one way or another, you're going to go out and you're going to find out what it takes and how to go about fulfilling that purpose. And I think this is one of the most important lessons to understand why God lets us struggle. The struggle makes you alive. It's a part of coming alive, because it's a part of pursuing purpose, and it's a part of pursuing responsibility. Another way to say that is, will you pursue responsibility even when it's not easy? So you need to ask yourself, what is your purpose at home, at work, with the church? What is your purpose towards your friends? What is your purpose towards God? And if you want to discover what your purpose is, just ask yourself, what are your responsibilities towards these people, towards these places and institutions? What is your purpose and responsibility towards the American government? If you can figure out what responsibilities you're supposed to be fulfilling, you can answer the question, what is my purpose towards these things? And then you can, when you understand what your responsibilities are, you can voluntarily take them up. And when you voluntarily take them up, I think you're going to be at your strongest as an image bearer, meant to rule according to Genesis 1:26. But if your perspective is, another thing that I have to do, you're not going to be motivated to fulfill your responsibilities. When I was teaching with students, I always told them, I'll never make you pray because God's not going to make you pray. You don't have to pray, you get to pray. Praying to God and actually having Him listen to you is a privilege. It's a responsibility. You should accept that responsibility and learn to pray. And as we're learning boundaries and responsibilities, we also need to learn healthy rhythms. Rhythms of work and rhythms of rest, all with the long-term good in mind. I could also say that healthy rhythms are boundaries of positives, negatives, and neutrals. Boundaries of moving forward, boundaries of possibly moving back or changing course, possible boundaries of let's not do anything right now. Let's just wait. And if you can work out the rhythms of when are you going to move forward, when are you going to move back, when are you going to not move at all. I mean, a good general has to know these things. If you're going to be a good leader of men and a good director of people, even just your own family, you're going to have to know when's the time to move, when's the time that you are moving, that you need to stop moving, when's the time to not move or stop moving is just to stand still. These are good questions. If you're a military general, you have to know push the armies, pull them back, retreat, do nothing, hold, basic things that are only applicable in war because they're applicable in everyday human life. So easily missed that we can go our whole lives and never actually think about them. Now, healthy rhythms are predicated upon healthy boundaries. Boundaries being kept, boundaries being set. Because the second you start saying you're just go, 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 go all the time, and never allowing yourself a rhythm of rest, you're going to burn out. I had a pastor friend before I moved to Colorado who worked 7 days a week and took no time off. He claimed that his time off was watching a movie with his wife on Saturday nights. That was his time off. Other than that, he just worked 7 days a week. I said, you're never going to be able to sustain that. So I was interning for him during the summer, and he had a twin brother. And his twin brother came to me while we were at Falls Creek, actually, because I'm going to be there in another week and a half. I'm at Falls Creek, and his twin brother comes up to me, and he says, how come you sleep so much? And I said, what do you mean, how come I sleep so much? I'm 21, and I'm in this ministry thing for the long haul. I'm not I think he and his brother were roughly the age that I am now. They're roughly 35. And I said, I am not going to be like your brother. I am not going to work 7 days a week and never take a break. I'm just not going to do it because I actually want to be successful in ministry when I'm 70, when I'm 80. I want to make it to the end of the race the way Paul says it. Your brother is going to burn out, and the best thing that you can do is go to him and teach him, convict him. Well, it's not your job to convict, but talk to him until he's convicted that he actually needs to take time off. He's got 3 kids. One of them is 6 months old, and he barely sees them because he works all the time. He's going to end up divorced, away from his kids, and no longer in ministry because he doesn't have good boundaries on how to actually do ministry. One of the best things that I learned in my first internship, so that was my second internship. My first internship in 2010, so this was about 2 years before the previous story, is I'm in Oklahoma, Muskogee, Oklahoma. And my first youth minister, Eric, had hired me as his intern, and he always had Mondays off, but he always said he had trouble because he was so empathic with carrying around people's emotions. So people would come into his office, they need to talk, he would talk, and then he would feel so burdened about what they shared that he would have to get up and go across the street to the gym and run on the track and work out other people's emotions, not even himself, not even his emotions, just other people's emotions. Because he was trying to keep a healthy boundary, because he knew he could not walk around with everybody else's emotions bottled up inside of him. Exactly. He was aware. He was probably roughly, 32 at that time. He had two young kids. Probably his oldest daughter was Sam's age, and his young son was probably just a little bit older than Kara at that time. And, I remember that because that was a good rhythm that he had built into his life. He understood that, one, he took Mondays off because he needed time to process. Because so many of these people would come and talk to him on Sunday at church, and he would need Monday to actually recover from it. But even during the rest of the week, he would go and do running to keep people's empathic emotions out of his life, or at least out of the core of his life. That might be the better way to say it. Leave work at work to the best of your ability. And if you wanted to say it this way, integrity is the integration of all the qualities of God that you want to possess. And one of the qualities that you see Jesus very good at is he knows when to engage the crowds, but then he also knows when to leave the crowds and go spend time with God alone by himself. And he doesn't let the crowds dictate when that's going to be. Jesus had good, healthy rhythms because he set great boundaries, and he kept those boundaries. And you find that the times that the gospel writers most say that Jesus looked at the crowds and took pity on them were usually after he'd been away from them for a while. He's gone away and he's recharged. That introverted side of yourself that then allows the extroversion to come out and actually engage with other people. A healthy boundary kept and set provides the healthy rhythms. And so this goes back to, you need healthy boundaries, you need healthy responsibilities, but to maintain them, you need healthy rhythms. So my advice is never be afraid or ashamed to say no to things if they'll violate your normal healthy rhythms too far. If you set up good boundaries, healthy boundaries, and then people come along and they put your boundaries to the test, whatever they are, and they're simple things. You got to know when you need to step away and not engage in another thing. Not let your boss put another responsibility on you just because he needs to pawn it off on somebody. You have to be able to stand up to your boss and say, I cannot do this now. To do that with respect. Even Prince Zuko in his hunt for the Avatar, when he said he was tired, Iroh, who's a genius, says you should rest. A man needs his rest. And that's like the ending of his arc in season 1. His entire arc in season 1, book 1, Water, is we have to find the Avatar. And he relentlessly hunts the Avatar. And at the end of the season, he's like, I'm tired. I'm just going to take a break. And we see the first step in his growth and redemption arc. Zuko, by the way, is the perfectly written character for an anti-hero's redemption arc. I mean, just absolutely brilliant over the 64 episodes that is this series. He even relapses at the end of season 2 and does terrible things only to be racked with guilt, work it out, and stand up to his father and say, I'm abandoning you, this nation, and I'm going to go off and do the right thing by helping them stop you. I mean, it's brilliant. I could do whole video essays and thesis on Zuko's brilliant character arc. So this is what you want to do. You want to build integrity by properly integrating boundaries, responsibilities, and rhythms. And when you bring them all together, that's really where you have what God defines as life. Life to the full, the way John describes it. But you have to be able to do that. If you're lacking responsibilities, but you're good with boundaries and rhythms, you're not going to actually have the purpose and the drive to actually find meaning in life. If you're willing to have boundaries and responsibilities, but you have unhealthy rhythms, you'll typically get too far in any direction, and then it'll collapse in on itself. You'll take up too many responsibilities because you don't have healthy rhythms. Your boundaries will start to erode. You'll take up you'll start pushing boundaries, taking up too much responsibility, and then those boundaries will erode. Because you haven't integrated a rhythm of saying, let me step away from fulfilling responsibilities. Let me step away from active activity. I'm finding more and more over the last 10 to 15 years the trend of pastors who don't have rhythms trying to go on sabbatical every 5 years or something. They come to their church and they say, I need a sabbatical. I need 9-10 months off. Because they're burnt out, they're overworked because they never set good rhythms, they didn't set healthy boundaries, they didn't know how to delegate, they took too much responsibilities on themselves, and they don't have really good life. And they're like, if either I'm going to resign or I need a break. I need 6 months off. And then the church says, okay, well, we don't want you to leave. We'll give you 6 months off. And the church just has to survive for 6 months to bring the pastor back. And then the whole thing starts over again, because they never set good, healthy boundaries. It happens, and it's wild, largely because so many churches are being run like businesses today, and pastors are treated like CEOs rather than shepherds, shepherding people. So you need to think through, okay, what are the healthy boundaries in my life? What boundaries are lacking? What do I need to set them up? God set up healthy boundaries in Genesis 1. So I need to have healthy boundaries. God gave us responsibilities, so you need to have healthy responsibilities. And God built through the Sabbath rest and rhythms into life so that we could navigate our responsibilities properly while realizing that we're not really in control and we can take a break and the universe isn't going to implode. Your life isn't going to come tumbling down because you take a break. If your church can fail because you're not there, your church should fail because it's built upon a principle other than Jesus Christ. That's what I've always told pastors who think that it's all their responsibilities and have no good, healthy rhythms or boundaries. So, a couple of final notes here. Organizing our lives is usually the first step to tackling chaos and disorder and getting on the path to growth. I have not read this book. I typed "make your bed" as a good first step of organizing your life. And when I went to go look at a picture, this book popped up. Admiral William McRaven apparently wrote a book called "Make Your Bed: Small Things That Can Change Your Life and Maybe the World." Because it's the small things that you need to actually start building the rhythms of that will help you actually tackle the bigger things down the road. So just start small. And the smallest thing that you can probably do is build the rhythm into your life to just make your bed. If you're not sleeping in it, make your bed. Keep it clean, keep it organized, and then from your bed, move to the rest of your bedroom, organize and clean that space. Keep your bathroom clean and organized. Maintain order. And when things get disordered, and things will always get disordered, take time, build in the rhythm of reordering them. And the way that you handle big chaotic events is to start small and move to tackle bigger beasts. So start small and make your bed. God has designed the world we live in to exist in such a way that we are at our best when we integrate boundaries of rhythms, when we integrate boundaries, responsibilities, and rhythms in healthy long-term ways. And to do this, try understanding the world as a big temple and your place within that temple, and what responsibilities within God's home you're going to take up. Another way that I could say this is I once had a pastor say a man has to live by a code. And I think that's pretty true. And I don't think he was saying this at a men's conference, and so that's why he talked about men. But I think everybody needs to live by their code. You need to live by your values. So you need to figure out what your code is, and you need to live by it. As Christians, our code is supposed to be God's instruction, God's word. It's supposed to teach us what is respect, honor, and obedience, what is faithfulness, what is cleanliness. How do we study and grow as a person? And my advice to you over the next 2 weeks is go watch The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. Because this is a man, this story is exactly the point. A man who is traumatized from war because he had to go kill a bunch of Indians in the post-Civil War era, I think, right? And so he's a drunk. He's kind of a bumbling fool when he's drunk, and he puts on these shows to make money. He's not exactly a bumbling fool, but he's just not a man because he has no responsibilities, because he's traumatized by what happened. And his drinking is prolonging his ability to deal with it. And then finally, some people come along and they say, hey, why don't you come with us to Japan and train soldiers, Japanese soldiers, to use our American weaponry, our guns, and then they're going to take on the samurai. We'll pay you good money for that. But when he gets there and he gets captured by the samurai, he discovers an entire way of living that he never knew about. A devotion to whatever it is that you're doing from sunup to sundown that involves your entire being. And he realizes that as he engages in a samurai code, he comes to find a new purpose for life. That's a good story of a man rediscovering purpose by going outside of everything that he knows, confronting war and chaos and all the destructive forces out there, but actually learning that there is an Edenic beauty garden somewhere out there that he can live and partake of if he takes up the code, if he takes up the code of the samurai in this case. But I think that's a good story to say that's exactly how it's supposed to work for all of us. If you actually know what code you want to live by, if you actually know the approach of life, and my approach is try to think and understand your life as if you're living within a cosmic temple, a home for God where He lives, and you're just invading His space by His own desire. But you keep invading that space so long as you live up to your purpose. Your purpose is bound up in living within His boundaries, taking up responsibility voluntarily in healthy ways. So figure that out and work that out